Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for holding this hearing. Thank you for your civility. And I think we all look forward to the markup tomorrow. Also, by the way, thank you for releasing the budget a little bit earlier than is often released, and our side at least had a few hours to examine it. As we all know, and as the chairman indicated, the federal budget that we are working on is not an appropriations bill. It does not provide explicit funding for this or that agency or this or that program. What it does do is lay the foundation for that process and tells the Appropriation Committee through the 302A allocations the total amount of money that they have to spend. In other words, this budget is more than just a very long list of numbers. The federal budget is about our national priorities and about our values. It is about who we are as a nation and what we stand for. It is about how we assess the problems facing our country and how we resolve them. That is what our committee is undertaking, and it is a very, very serious responsibility. Let's be clear. No family, no business, no local or state government can responsibly write a budget without first understanding the problems and challenges that it faces. And that is even more true when we deal with a federal budget of some $4 trillion. As I examine the budget brought forth by the Republicans in the House and here in the Senate, this is how I see their analysis of the problems facing our country. At a time of massive wealth and income inequality, my Republican colleagues apparently believe that the richest people in this country need to be made even richer. It is apparently not good enough that 99% of all new income today is going to the top 1%. It is not good enough that the top 1/10 of 1% today own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Just not good enough. Clearly, in the eyes of many Republicans, the wealthy and the powerful need more help. Not only should they not be asked to pay more in taxes, my Republican colleagues believe that we should cut tax rates for millionaires and billionaires. It is not good enough that corporate America is enjoying record-breaking profits, and that the CEOs of large corporations earn some 290 times more than what their average employees earn. It is apparently not good enough that since 1985, the top 1/10 of 1% has seen a more than $8 trillion increase in its wealth than what they would have had if wealth inequality had stayed at the same level that it was in 1985. An $8 trillion increase in wealth for the top 1/10 of 1%. But for many of my Republican colleagues, just not good enough. Meanwhile, as I understand the Republican view of our country, as manifested in the House and Senate budgets, it appears that millions of middle-class and working families, people who are working longer hours for lower wages, people who have seen significant declines in their standard of living over the last 40 years, these people apparently do not need our help. Rather, they need to see a major reduction in federal programs that make their lives and the lives of their children a little bit better. At a time when we have over 45 million Americans living in poverty, more than almost any time in the modern history of this country, my Republican colleagues think that we should increase that number by cutting the Earned Income Tax Credit, affordable housing, and Medicaid. At a time when almost 20% of our children live in poverty, the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world, my Republican colleagues think that maybe we should raise the childhood poverty rate a little bit higher by cutting child care, by cutting Head Start, by cutting the child tax credit, and by cutting nutrition programs for hungry children. To summarize, the rich get much richer, and the Republicans think they need more help. The middle class and working families of this country become poorer, and the Republicans think we need to cut programs they desperately need. Frankly, that may be the priorities of some people in this room, but I do not believe that these are the priorities of the American people. Mr. Chairman, today the United States remains the only industrialized country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all of its people. We have about 40 million Americans who lack health insurance and millions more, as we all know, who are underinsured. Well, apparently that is not good enough for my Republican colleagues. They want to abolish the Affordable Care Act and take away the health insurance of some 16 million Americans who have gained insurance through that program. In other words, instead of having 40 million people uninsured, we would have 56 million people without health insurance. And then if you include the cuts in Medicaid that they propose for some of the most vulnerable families in America, that number goes even higher. Further, when you make massive cuts in Medicaid, you also cut the nursing home care for seniors, perhaps the most vulnerable and helpless people in our country. Is that really what we are about as a nation? I've talked a little bit about the devastating impact that the House and Senate Republican budgets would have on the American people, but equally important is what these budgets do not do, the serious problems they do not address. Poll after poll tells us that the issue that the American people are most concerned about is jobs, wages, and the economy. That's what the American people are mostly concerned about, and for good reasons. Despite a significant improvement in the economy over the last 6 years, since President Obama has been in office, real unemployment today is not the official 5.5%, it is 11%. Youth unemployment is over 17%, and African-American youth unemployment is much higher than that. What the American people want and what the Republican budget ignores is the need to create millions of decent-paying jobs. And in my view, and in the view of economists all over this country, the fastest way to do that is to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, airports, dams, levees, and rural broadband. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we need to invest over $3 trillion by the year 2020 in our infrastructure. At a time when millions of Americans are working for starvation wages, and when the federal minimum wage remains an abysmal $7.25 an hour, we need a budget that substantially increases wages for low-income and middle-income workers. We also need pay equity in this country so that women do not make 78 cents on the dollar compared to men who do the same work. Further, we need to address the overtime scandal in this country, in which many of our people are working 50 or 60 hours a week and are not getting time and a half. Those are the issues that the American people are concerned about. In Vermont and across this country, unfortunately, the Republican budget refuses to address these issues of enormous consequence. I can tell you that in Vermont, and I suspect every state that we represent, young people and their families are enormously frustrated by the high cost of college education and the horrendously oppressive student debt that many of them leave school with. In fact, student debt today at $1.2 trillion is the second largest category of debt in this country, more than credit card debt and auto loan debt. Does the Republican budget do anything to lower interest rates on student debt? In fact, their budget would make a bad situation even worse. Does the Republican budget support President Obama's initiative to make 2 years of community college free, or any other effort to make college more affordable? Sadly, it does not. But what it does do is cut $90 billion in Pell Grants over a 10-year period. Mr. Chairman, my Republican colleagues are concerned about the deficit, which, by the way, has been reduced by more than 2/3 in the last 6 years. Every member on this side of the aisle is also concerned about the deficit. My Republican friends are concerned about an $18 trillion national debt. We are concerned about an $18 trillion national debt. But what many of us recognize is that one reason in recent years that debt has gone up is we went into 2 wars and we forgot to pay for them. We created an insurance-written Medicare Part D insurance program, forgot to pay for that. And we provided huge tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country, didn't offset it. Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, the high national debt is an issue that we are also concerned about, but where we disagree is how you address the deficit and the debt. What we believe is that from a moral perspective and an economic perspective, you do not balance the budget on the backs of the elderly, the children, the sick and the poor, and then give tax breaks to the rich and large corporations. Today, major corporation after major corporation pays in a given year zero in federal income taxes. According to a recent report from the Congressional Research Service, each and every year, profitable corporations are avoiding about $100 billion in taxes by stashing their profits in the Cayman Islands and other offshore tax havens. In 1952, corporations contributed about 32% of all federal revenue. Today, that number is about 11%. In terms of individual tax rates, we have the absurd situation where hedge fund managers who make hundreds of millions of dollars a year pay an effective tax rates lower than a truck driver or a nurse. Do you think anybody in America thinks that makes sense? And the last point that I want to make is that the best way we can do a budget, an effective budget, is to move to a full employment economy with jobs that are paying workers a living wage. When we do that, by investing in infrastructure, by investing in education, by investing in research and development, we not only improve the lives of millions of our people, we also take a major step forward in lowering the deficit and lowering the national debt. Because when people are working at decent paying jobs, they are paying taxes. When they pay taxes and we increase revenue, we lower the national debt. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I certainly look forward to the remainder of this hearing.